Am I the asshole for telling my stepdaughter that she does not have to hug the disabled boy in her class? Quick background, I am neurotypical, so please correct me if anything I say is offensive or incorrect. I refer to her as my stepdaughter in the title and not my daughter to highlight that I'm a relatively new parent, and I'm still not sure about a lot of how I handle things. My stepdaughter is 6 and I've been in her life since she was 3. Last year, pre-COVID, my SD was involved in a kids' theater group for fun. We had her pick one weekly activity to join, expecting a sport. She's very into football lol, but she surprised us. We used to go 1-2 times a week. There is a boy in her class who I will call John. John is neurodivergent, though I'm not sure exactly what his disabilities are. He has a lot of aggression and is easily overstimulated. His mom expressed that she was trying to get him more comfortable around other kids so she could feel okay starting him in kindergarten. John would spit, slap and pull hair. These actions were always either immediately disciplined, or stopped before they could even happen, by his mom, who seemed to be a vigilant and caring parent. On Valentine's Day, she had John bring in cards for everyone in the group. She had him go around and hand the cards personally, and either give a fist bump, high five or hug. With most of the girls he'd hug them and even give them a small cheek kiss. I could see my daughter starting to panic. She hates being touched. She has some sensory issues herself and barely lets even me or her father kiss goodnight, hug hello. I told her not to worry, and if she didn't want a hug she could say so. Her eyes got wide and teary and she asked if I could tell him for her. I said, why don't you try first? If you can't, I'll always help you. When he came up to us with the card, my daughter took it and said the gentlest, squeakiest little no I've ever heard when he went to hug her. He either didn't hear or didn't realize what she wanted, so I placed my hand on her shoulder and pulled her back toward me, saying, "Thank you so much, John. SD does not want a hug." His mother looked like she'd been slapped. Her face went red and then she was the one tearing up. She rushed John away and shot a "Thanks, that's great. That's just really great" behind her as she went with him to the other side of the room. The other parents, mostly moms, totally took her side, and did not chat with me much for the few weeks we still met for theater after the incident. I was pretty much a pariah. I was very much viewed as the grown-ass woman who just bullied a disabled child. My daughter was very apologetic, which broke my heart. I was helping her in the car and she said, "I'll just hug him next time, okay?" I do not want her to ever think she has to adjust her boundaries for anyone. But I have so much sympathy for that young mom who was just trying to help her son and can't help but feel like I threw a wrench in it. Am I the asshole? Not the asshole. And I will likely get downvoted for this, but while I sympathize with John and his mother, I think this is an extremely poor precedent to set. He should not be taught to expect that sort of physical contact from his female classmates, as they have every right to their own bodily autonomy and shouldn't feel pressured to say yes, especially at only 6 years old. Not the asshole. Frankly, I'm shocked and ashamed of some of the comments here saying, NTA but she should have given a fist bump or high five instead, or NTA but you should have warned the mother ahead of time. Fuck that noise. Your SD does not owe anyone physical contact of any kind, for any reason. No matter what. Please report this to the teacher, principal, school counselor. No child should be bullied for not providing physical affection. Your SD is not obligated to do anything for anyone, hug or otherwise. No means no. I empathize with the child's mother, but she's teaching him that he is entitled to girls' affections. Not the asshole, and you look a good parent. Not the asshole, you just taught your daughter a great lesson in consent. She didn't want to be touched and so she wasn't. You're doing great. Explain to the other moms about your daughter's boundaries and that it wasn't personal. But if they still give you hell, then fuck 'em, because you weren't mean to that little boy and you had your daughter's back. Good for you, mama, stay strong. Not the asshole. The other parents are being shitty. She does not have to hug or touch other people. If someone mentions something, then give them a blank expression and say, she doesn't owe anyone access to her body. We do not force her. Not the asshole. No one is entitled to access to anyone else's body, and that includes letting kids decide if they do or don't want to hug people. For the record, I am neurodivergent and I find this whole situation pretty uncomfortable. If I were John and a teacher singled me out like that, I would be so humiliated, and if I was in a class with John, the first would be upset on his behalf and on my own. I also wonder if they would be bending over backwards like this if John were a girl. Everything about this situation is gross except for your daughter wanting to decide what she does with her own body and your desire to back up her right to do so. I bet John's mother is one of those autism moms who makes everything about her. Not the asshole. It's a perfect age to be teaching kids consent. Other parents often see people's concern of their own children as a personal attack to their child. She should in fact use this to teach him about consent and that if people aren't comfortable with certain behaviors, that's okay. If you were to force your stepdaughter to hug him, you would be teaching her to not express her consent and boundaries, which can be damaging and dangerous in future. I think you handled this perfectly well and were reasonable. Not the asshole. As a parent, it's your job to make sure your daughter is comfortable, and that's exactly what you did. You knew she didn't want to be hugged and made sure her boundaries were clear. But I do suggest you mention to the mother that it's not because of her child, that it's sensory issues, and that you hope there are no hard feelings. After that, there isn't much more you can do. I wish you the best. Not the asshole. No child should ever feel obligated to give hugs if they are uncomfortable. To anyone. Consent is everything. Being comfortable is everything. You did the right thing and I'm proud of you. Not the asshole. I understand the other mom probably felt the instinct to feel bad for her son, but she has to realize that other children have boundaries that have to be accommodated as well, not just her son. You were right for allowing and encouraging your daughter to assert her boundaries, and that will help her more in the future. Not the asshole. It's never okay to make a kid allow anyone to touch them. Kids need to learn boundaries and respect others. The other mom knows this, but she just can't see straight right now. My heart breaks for both kids. Heartbreak, but you did absolutely the right thing. Why not talk about it with the mom? She hopefully will get it. And if not, she is the awe. They probably didn't hear the no and don't know about the sensory issues. Don't apologize, but explain your point of view. But you are doing the right thing for your child. This is her boundary and everyone needs to respect it, even the neurodivergent kid. This could be a great lesson for both about boundaries and why they are different for everyone. Not the asshole. Thank you for protecting your stepdaughter. Forcing kids to hug anyone is wrong. Not the asshole. These moms are laying the foundation for rape culture, girls who feel guilted into saying yes, and boys who can't take no for an answer. Physical touch is one of those single veto things in life. Did the boy ask if daughter would like a fist bump, high five, or hug? That would be the appropriate approach here. Letting John choose the contact, then just expecting the other kids to be okay with it, is just reinforcing in an already aggressive child that he can do whatever he wants to people. Just because the adults view it as positive rather than negative touch contact doesn't change the fact that it's negatively impacting all the children involved. Not the asshole. This isn't being ableist, it's teaching kids to respect boundaries. Neither kid was looking to harm anyone, and it doesn't sound like your stepdaughter was discriminating against this kid at all. Children don't have to hug people if it makes them uncomfortable. Teaching them otherwise can lead to them feeling uncomfortable, and in worst-case scenarios can desensitize them to inappropriate, unwanted contact from others. If my stepparent had my back the way you have your daughters, I'd have turned out a lot differently. You are fantastic. Thanks for being her support and stepping up as a bonus mom. Obvious. Not the asshole. Not the asshole. Maybe you can talk to his mom and say that even though your daughter really appreciates John giving cards and wants to be friends, if that's true, she doesn't like being touched by anyone and wasn't trying to make him feel bad. He shouldn't have a problem understanding that being touched is something she doesn't like. I'm sure everyone has something they really don't like. Not the asshole. Kids don't have to hug other kids or adults if they don't want to. Even kids with disabilities. You did exactly what you should have. You helped your kid try to state her own boundaries and helped her reinforce them. It's possible the other mom didn't actually hear your kid say no, and she's making wild assumptions about you, but that's really not an excuse. I think this whole thing is disgusting. How dare she encourage her son to kiss little girls and expect that to be okay? Not the asshole. Your stepdaughter doesn't owe anybody physical contact of any kind. Good on you, mama, for teaching your kid that her boundaries should be respected and standing up for them. When I was 10, I was in a similar situation to your SD. At a theater camp there was a neurodivergent boy who was there every day with his mom. He was older and bigger, and on 2 occasions he put his hand on my leg. I don't think he meant anything by it, but it made me very uncomfortable. After the camp was older, I told my mom, When she asked why I didn't tell her or any of the adults in charge, I said it was because I didn't think he meant anything or that he knew what he was doing. Mom said, "It doesn't matter. No one is allowed to touch you without your permission. Not the asshole," and 100% the same advice to your SD. Not the asshole. I'd recommend talking to John's mom and let her know that you weren't aiming to offend her son, who she is helping overcome some of his social skills, but you were protecting SD, who does not like to be touched. In a way, you helped John learn that some people will say no to hugs or any other contact. You said thank you and that SD didn't want a hug. You shouldn't have to explain why she doesn't want a hug. The fact that others expect you to just let SD get a hug she doesn't want means we fail as a culture. Good for you for teaching SD that no means no and she should not cave. No, you are not the asshole. While the mom is a caring and kind parent, she shouldn't guilt-trip you because your daughter didn't want a hug, which should be a choice of hers, and especially a kiss from a boy she barely knows. The mom was definitely overstepping her boundaries, and so were the other moms for shaming you. You are not even close to being the asshole in that situation. Not the asshole, and you're being an amazing parent by teaching her to set boundaries and that she doesn't have to do anything she doesn't feel comfortable with. I think it's important to talk to John's mom to tell her that it's nothing against him, it's just that your daughter doesn't like physical contact and that you're teaching her to set boundaries. Not the asshole. Boundaries are incredibly important, and I am very glad you had her back when she didn't want to give a hug. If a person doesn't feel comfortable touching someone else, then they shouldn't, regardless of who's asking for it, and it is a pity that John's mother isn't teaching him that as well. Not the asshole. I'm sorry about John's condition. I really am. However, he has to live in this world with the rest of us. And he has to follow the same rules too. He can't just expect everyone to appease him just because of his condition. A no is a no. Good on you for teaching your daughter how to set boundaries and say no. Not the asshole. John doesn't have the monopoly on neurodivergent behavior, and his mom needs to accept that. Your child doesn't need to step outside of her comfort zone for him. He will be fine. Sounds like John's mommy loves a victim complex. Not the asshole. I was sexually harassed by my neurodivergent brother because he was always told people should accept his hugs, attempts at physical contact. It is not a good idea to tell any child their boundaries do not matter just because it might upset someone else. It quickly spirals. Right now John just wants a hug and maybe a cheek kiss. What about when he's older, going through puberty, and he now believes people should accept his advances because he can't control that he's different? Too many parents of young neurodivergent children coddle them in a way the rest of the world can't, and shouldn't. You did the right thing. You need to sit down with John's mom. I think she means well, but she needs to know 1. That John cannot expect any physical contact with anyone, ever, and 2. John is not the only kid with special needs, aversions, requests, etc. Your SD has a good stepmom who taught her, is teaching her boundaries and to use her voice. Not the asshole for reasons everyone has already stated. But, as someone who was painfully shy as a child and had severe social anxiety for years and was punished for it and forced into interactions that I bungled miserably, I just want you to know I nearly cried reading Why Don't You Try First? And if you can't, I'll always help you. That's everything I wish 6-year-old me could have heard when I was flushed red and uncomfortable and about to cry. You're doing such a good job with her. Heart. Not the asshole. You handled this perfectly, and while it's natural for the mother, John, to be upset, your SD doesn't need to appease that by doing a high five or fist bump instead, so ignore everyone saying that. You both thanked him for the card and you don't owe anything else. Absolutely not. If someone says something, you can say, I am teaching my daughter to respect her own boundaries. If you have a problem with that, fine, but I will not force my daughter to accept physical touch when she does not want to. You don't have to explain she has sensory issues. Kids without sensory issues should be allowed to say no as well. Those parents will be in for a rude awakening should their kid ever be assaulted because we have to hug, kiss, touch others against our will. Not the asshole. Not the asshole. You took care of the person you are responsible for. As a person with a neurodiverse child, the other mom should understand not everyone appreciates physical contact. I have a daughter that barely tolerates any contact and have always tried to encourage her to maintain a level she is comfortable with, not what someone else expects. Not the asshole. SD doesn't owe anyone physical contact or an explanation. I think a no-touch option should be introduced for the kids moving forward so that all kids can have another option. Perhaps hug, first bump, hug, or hop, both kids hop at the same time, no touching. I think explaining to the other mom that your daughter has sensory processing issues would be a teachable moment for herself and her kid. She probably interpreted no hug to be a slight towards her son rather than a boundary. As the mom of a neurodivergent kid, she's probably so focused on her son's issues that she's not conscious that anyone else could have issues as well, especially if they present as neurotypical. Not the asshole. I hate being hugged by most people. As a child there was so much pressure to allow it. I was often seen as grumpy. My mantra was don't touch me. Family thought it funny at best. More often I was called rude. It takes years before I'm comfortable enough to hug friends. And when someone reaches for me I panic a bit. Even with someone familiar. Would I have been diagnosed as a kid as neuroatypical? I think so. I'm grateful that awareness of this is a thing. You taught your daughter a basic, but incredibly important lesson on consent. Instilling a fear of being rude into our young people, particularly girls, is the cause of so many of our society's problems. I'm sure other mom has a lot going on and I can't judge, but she missed a really valuable learning opportunity for her son. Not the asshole. The fist bump, high five, or hug thing is supposed to allow the person being greeted to choose, not the greeter. You're not the asshole and here's why. No means no. I'm raising 2 boys. Depending on how I raise them, they're either going to be respectful of people's boundaries and space or they're going to believe they're entitled to whatever they want, which could potentially include someone else's body. This is not okay. John's mom should have taken the chance to explain to him how to properly handle rejection, say okay and walk TF away, which is vital in proper social situations. John's mom is not the asshole. You did exactly the right thing. I think what John's mom was trying to do is admirable and I appreciate your kindness about it, but other kids are real people, not objects for John's learning opportunities. I am not okay with teaching kids they owe physical affection to other people. Not the asshole. Why should your child be uncomfortable to make her child comfortable? In fact, because his disability may make it harder for him to grasp, he should especially be taught that some people don't want to be touched. As someone who doesn't like being touched as well, I commend you for standing up for it with your daughter. It's not about what disability they have. Your daughter doesn't like being touched in general. You weren't bullying, you were just sticking up for what your daughter is comfortable with. At my age my parents would have forced me to hug him even if I was uncomfortable with it. Thank you for addressing that's it okay not to like physical contact at such a young age. Not the asshole. She's 6 and is already feeling pressured about saying no in an uncomfortable situation? I really think this needs addressing with her in a chat of some sort, like how has he reacted to her saying no before? What's caused this fear she has of this boy? I also think you need to sit down with John's mom and talk to her about consent, because this bit probably will earn me some downvotes, and may seem harsh, but this is how people end up with kids who become rapists. It needs to be taught from an early age that no is an acceptable answer. If the mom doesn't listen, then she's being an enabler, and for the safety of your child maybe also raise this concern with the people who run the group, like teachers or whatever. Not the asshole. Not the asshole. From what I read, you're doing a great job as a stepdad. I understand she wants to help him be more comfortable around under other kids, but she also needs to teach him to understand and respect other people's wishes, which she clearly failed here. I'm fighting with my relatives on this, sorta, with my son. He has hearing aids, but isn't totally deaf, but he definitely does not like being picked up unless he asks. He doesn't like people super close to him, or looking over his shoulder, etc. For goodbyes I just tell him to wave bye, and blow kisses. We don't even try to let people get a hug in, because it just strains the relationship more. People just don't get it, and it's so frustrating. The more they try and push for physical contact, the harder my kid will reject it. Very difficult to explain to adults. Lol. You 100% have the high ground here. If I were in your shoes I'd send out a list of body safety rules to every parent in the class. I'm not even being spiteful. That mom is teaching her kid to ignore consent and trying to take control of your kid's body away from her. Not the asshole. Not the asshole. Not the asshole. Girls' bodies are their own. They don't belong to little boys who want to give them an innocent little kids, grandmothers, strangers at the grocery store, or anyone else but themselves. It's not a good precedent to set to force little girls to allow physical touch that they don't want. I get that the other mom wanted her son to have a pleasant interaction with all his classmates, but she does not have a right to step over your child's boundary. Not the asshole. Why in heck do these other parents in the group not see that a child has the right not to hug if she doesn't want to? I had a child in school that refused to give those tacky paper valentines to kids she didn't like. Somehow that was my problem to deal with according to the teacher. Told teach I wouldn't force my daughter to do something she felt was lying to herself. Your SD did what felt right to her, you go girl. I wonder if the kid with a difficult time controlling his moods just learned it's appropriate to throw a tantrum when a girl rejects his physical advances. Great. I got grief from my mom because I wouldn't force grandson to hug her. His body, his rules. All the other parent is teaching her son is that it's okay to hug and kiss girls without their consent, and when they refuse it's okay to be offended and act like the hurt party. Good for you for standing up for your daughter op. If you had allowed her to be hugged you would be the asshole as it stands, not the asshole.